Let's talk about Yevgeny Prigozhin, the boss of the Wagner Group, who's been reported dead. Russian authorities say he was on a jet that crashed on its way from Moscow to St. Petersburg. It happened exactly 2 months after Prigozhin led his Wagner forces in a short-lived mutiny against the Russian state. There's so much speculation about what happened and what it could mean. Here are 3 big questions we're left with. Let's start with the first one. Who was behind it? The private jet was registered to Prigozhin. There were 10 people listed as being on board, including 3 crew. It was going from Moscow to St. Petersburg. About 30 minutes into the flight, the plane basically dropped out of the sky. Everyone on board was killed. We can't rule out that it was an accident, and the Russia aviation authorities have launched an investigation. But there's also a lot of speculation that foul play was involved because of how the plane crashed and Prigozhin's notoriety. And if that's the case, who would have wanted Prigozhin dead? Well, potentially Vladimir Putin, the Russian president. Prigozhin's mutiny in June was the biggest threat he'd ever faced to his authority.
А то, с чем мы столкнулись, это именно предательство. Непомерные амбиции и личные интересы привели к измене и своей стране.
At the time, Putin appeared to be furious with Prigozhin, but pretty quickly it looked like things had been smoothed over. Prigozhin called off the mutiny after about 24 hours in a deal brokered by the president of Belarus. Over the next couple of months, it even started looking like Prigozhin had been forgiven, and it was business as usual for Wagner Group operations in Africa.
ЧВК «Вагнер» проводит РПД, делает Россию еще более великой на всех континентах, а Африку еще более свободной.
But just letting go of such a huge challenge to his power isn't really Putin's style.
Putin is someone who generally thinks that revenge is a dish best served cold. In my experience, Putin is the ultimate apostle of payback.
So there's a theory that the Russian state, with Putin's backing, played a role in bringing down the plane.
It's absolutely no coincidence. Ever since the aborted mutiny in late June, in which he embarrassed Vladimir Putin, he's been a marked man.
For about 24 hours after the crash, there was no response from the Kremlin. But then President Putin expressed condolences and praised Prigozhin as a talented businessman.
Пригожина я знал очень давно, с начала 90-х годов. Это был человек сложной судьбы, и ошибки у него были серьезные в жизни, и добивался он результатов нужных и для себя, и тогда, когда я его просил об этом для общего дела, как вот в эти последние месяцы.
Other theories for what happened to the Prigozhin plane include that Ukraine could have somehow been involved. Some Russian commentators have suggested this, although President Zelensky denies it. Remember, Prigozhin's Wagner forces have led a lot of the fighting for Russia and Ukraine up until that mutiny in June.
It was a terrorist attack of Ukrainian authorities, because for Ukrainian authorities, Yevgeny Prigozhin, the Wagner Group, was very big enemies.
I don't think President Putin is somehow involved in that, because if Putin wanted to get rid of Prigozhin, he had all the legal grounds to put him in jail for life.
The Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov has also called speculation of Putin's involvement in the Prigozhin plane crash an absolute lie. So when it comes to who was behind the plane crash, we may never know the full truth. Our next question is what Prigozhin's death could mean for Putin. Does it make him stronger or weaker? Well, again, we need to go back to that mutiny in June. One way of looking at it is that Prigozhin's death removes a threat to Putin.
To the extent he was weakened 2 months ago, he's now reinforcing himself as the strong man and making it clear to those around him that if they cross the Tsar, there will be consequences.
It's an extremely powerful message to send, obviously, to those who oppose the Kremlin. It comes on the same day that the head of the Russian aerospace forces, Sergey, the general, who was close to Prigozhin, was dismissed.
But there's another way of seeing this too, that Prigozhin's death might be a symbolic victory for Putin, but it doesn't actually solve his problems. The economy's under pressure, the war in Ukraine is going badly, and Prigozhin's death could even make divisions in the Russian military worse.
Is this the end of the political instability in Russia? Let's be honest, not a good look to be shooting down, if it is, or blowing up, or probably the most likely scenarios here, private jets over your own territory.
Our last question is, what will happen to the Wagner Group that Prigozhin led? The group is a PMC, a private military company, but it's basically been seen as a kind of arm of the Russian state and has been involved in many different conflicts, including Syria and Ukraine. But Africa is where Wagner really honed its business model.
The Wagner Group is not just a mercenary group, it's also a logging company, it's also an information and communication company, it's mining, but it's also serving a purpose for these governments in the region that seek alternative partnerships to the West.
Yevgeny Prigozhin was the man behind all of that, and who could replace him is not clear at all, especially because another senior Wagner leader, Dmitry Utkin, was also reported dead. He was on the same plane. So will the group survive?
But it seems that the Wagner Group has been decapitated. And that means, well, if not the end of the Wagner Group, but a serious, very serious handicap for their further activities.
It may be end of that name for it. It may turn out to be the end of its senior commanders. But I think it's a useful tool that works hand in hand with the Russian foreign service and the foreign military special forces. I don't think that's going to go away, but I think control of it may change.
But also remember that Prigozhin commanded thousands of soldiers who were known for being disciplined and loyal to him. A memorial to him has appeared outside the Wagner building in St. Petersburg. And following the news of the plane crash, a post on a Wagner-linked Telegram channel called him a hero and a Russian patriot, and said there were people behind it who were traitors to Russia. So how will all those mercenaries now react?
One would assume that Putin is trying to regain control of the Wagner Group, but it's a far-flung organization with some capability. Everyone will be watching to see if they go rogue.
If you want to know more about Yevgeny Prigozhin, check out our Start Here episode on the Wagner Group. We've also done one on Vladimir Putin.